wait, like that's there in its own space. I have my own agency in my life.
Hmm.
This doesn't have to overtake my psyche. Like, no one is really trying to, in everyday life, they usually don't say, well, where were you on social media? Like, I just feel like it becomes this artificial
Yeah.
society.
It's an
And
addiction.
it is. You
Let's
get like a
face it.
dopamine addiction and rush every
Yeah,
time you're on
yeah,
it.
yeah,
But
yeah.
then it ends. And then
And
you have
it
to begin it again.
and it doesn't really do anything
Yep.
for you. I mean, I think um, a writer needs to be quiet. A writer needs to be alone and not disturbed. And when you know, your email's pinging or your phone's ringing, you forget it. You can't think. You have to get into the zone. It's the same in athletics, photography, painting, any event. Really, you have to be quiet in order to get there.
This is Dr. Andrew Rimby. Thanks for joining us here in the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. If you don't know, you can get all of our episodes ad free on Patreon, patreon.com/Ivory Tower Boiler Room. All of Mary's true crime episodes ad free, video episodes ad free from the ITBR interviews. Also, follow us on Instagram, please. Ivory Tower Boiler Room. I like to put a lot of exciting arts and culture clips from the podcast, TV shows, films that we've discussed. TikTok is Dr. Andrew Rimby. Long story, the Ivory Tower Boiler Room one got taken off by TikTok because it was too salacious and scandalous, in my opinion. But I might be just having an Oscar Wilde complex there, thinking, that I was causing such a sensation on TikTok. So please rate us on Apple. It really, really helps. Review us. If you're on Spotify, you can rate us there too. YouTube, please follow our YouTube channel. Please like the video, share it with your friends, your community. The only way that I can keep giving you all free, exciting podcast episodes is because of the reach of the podcast. So, rating us, reviewing us, it really, really does help. Also, shout out to Sean, our intern, who, if you see the cover art, you see the edits of the podcast, that's all Sean. So, amazing work by Sean. So, I hope you all enjoy this episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. I love chatting with this guest. I think I've had her on, this has to be the third time, I think, if I'm right. And today we're going to talk all about psychological thrillers. We're going to talk about her psychological thriller, which is just such a well done novel. I can't wait for her to describe it. I'm joined with author Laury Egan. So, welcome back to the podcast, Laury.
Well, thank you, Andrew. It's always fun. Always fun.
So, I know we talked a lot about offline, just the way that you really get into Jenny Kidd, your newer novel. I mean, you're always writing, but just the way that you think about the psychological thriller, like what drew you to the psychological thriller as a genre, like even before you started writing?
Well, actually, this book was my first book, and then we did a revised edition because the publisher went out of business. So I got a chance, which rarely happens, to rewrite a little bit, but I didn't do anything major. I mean, the plot is the same, etc. But I was reading Patricia Highsmith's novels at the time, or right around the time that I was writing this. So she was definitely an influence, which is one of the things we're going to talk about today. But um, I love the way she creates suspense. There's this feeling of her characters are just sort of hanging out, innocent, naive types, and then they get slowly ensnared and in the web of a sociopath or, or worse.
Yeah.
And so she really was, I think, probably one of the original people to do that kind of a format and that kind of psychology. And that appealed to me a lot because I was very interested in psychology. I took quite a few courses at Carnegie Mellon way back, and then I've, done a lot of reading. So, a lot of my titles have some kind of strong psychological element to them. A friend of mine who I went to college with, he just said, I have a new book out called Morally the Very Best Basset Hand, and it's a comedy. And he said, nobody dies in this book. What's the matter with you? So,
No, you set this precedent now.
yeah.
But
So this was just always been a fascination with, my brain. I'm really interested in how someone background contributes to them being one of these characters and then how they act out on them. And Patricia Highsmith, in my humble opinion, was a sociopath.
mm,
And
well,
I don't know that she acted out on a lot of her feelings, but they were definitely there. She was really obsessed with murders and fraud and stalking and all of these things. And some of them she did herself, like stalking. In
mm,
fact, that the movie Carol, which was originally The Price of Salt, um, there is some stalking going on. She did have this happen, and she fell in love with this woman who came into, I don't know whether it was Bloomingdale's or where it was, but it was in New York City. And then she went and stalked her, took the train and went wherever she was in Connecticut or whatever.
mm.
So that was one of the times when she actually um, behaved in a fashion that her characters do.
Yeah,
So
well,
yeah.
I was just watching before coming on with you, rewatching Carol, and something I really noticed is this Patricia Highsmith has such a fascination, whether it's the talented Mr. Ripley, Carol, Strangers on a Train,
Hmm.
with queer paranoid obsession. And
Hmm.
like you're saying, like ensnaring someone in a web. It feels that she does such a nice job of exploring those elements, but like you said, there's also troubling baggage in her personal
Yes.
biography with
Yes.
that element.
Yeah. She had a tough growing up period. Her parents divorced 9 days before she was born. Her father took off and she didn't see him again until she was 12. And her mother quickly remarried and moved to New York City with her new husband when Pat was pretty small. And then they moved her eventually to the city. So there are real abandonment issues going on here. But probably one of the most fascinating is the relationship with her mother, Mary, who they just went at it over and over and over again in their letters, correspondence, in person. It was a love-hate relationship that was obsessive. And so sometimes Pat victimized her mother, and sometimes it was the other way around. So both of those components are frequently in Highsmith's works, and to some extent also in Jenny Kidd. So, there is a, sort of similarity there. But Highsmith was very interesting. I mean, you figure she wrote Strangers on the Train and had it published when she was 30. So she was a very serious writer. She worked very hard, but boy, was she somebody in comparing my work to hers, that's one thing, but please don't compare
You
me
may
to
not
her.
want to like you may not want to have her in your social circle.
I don't think I would enjoy her very much. In fact, the this book that I just finished,
Yeah.
which was um,
That's
a
it.
bio by Joan Shenkar of Highsmith, the beginning of it says she wasn't nice. She was rarely polite, and no one who knew her well would have called her a generous person. Well, oh boy, but she had affairs all over the place, often three women at a time, sometimes the ex of one of the women she was seeing at the same time. I mean, I don't know what was magnetic about her personality, but she just seemed to have one after another. And frequently, these women stayed in and out of her life for decades. So she had something going on, but then, a lot of sociopaths are very charming,
Mm, true.
because they want something. And, that's
And they're gonna
how
get
they
it.
get it.
Yeah, they're
Yeah,
magnetic. It's like American
right.
Psycho. It's
Yeah.
well, that's
Or
why I
Ted
find
Bundy type people.
yes. Well, that's why
Yeah.
I find it so interesting the difference between, say, Carol and Tom in The Talented Mr. Ripley. Like
Hmm.
they're very different,
Hmm.
constructions and identities. Like, did you see Saltburn?
Yeah, that was the one, the film that I compared this to
Mm,
because when I wrote this, I thought this would make a great film. But this was like 2012, and back then, it might have been a little too much. But after seeing Saltburn, I thought, oh, this would really fly. I mean, and you have Venice on top of it all because, it's a really exotic and erotic place, and it would make a beautiful film.
yeah,
But I
when
haven't
I
found
saw
anybody for it yet.
yeah, when I saw The Talented Mr. Ripley, because I have never seen the film before. I mean, first I loved Matt Damon and Gwyneth Paltrow, like the performances, but
Yeah.
it is I mean, it's such a troubling film, but also like how
Hmm.
someone steals someone's identity, and that to me is what made Saltburn so compelling. And
Hmm.
it seems like we have an appetite for this again. Like your book, Jenny Kidd, comes at such a ripe time. I mean, you said, right, it's a revised edition, but the psychological thriller is really understood now in culture. Like maybe
Hmm.
the way it wasn't in 2012. Like I think that's before Gone
Yeah,
Girl.
and that was pre-streaming when, we're constantly getting a fodder of these Harlan Coben, novels on film and, all of the BBC films. So yeah, it was a very different time. And I think The Talented Mr. Ripley, I just reread it again. I read it like twice way back, and I was amazed how fresh it was. It really was much better written than I had remembered because she's a little bit of a flat writer. Um, she doesn't give you as much backstory, or her vocabulary is a little quieter, a little more mundane than a really really good writer. But she knew what she was doing for what she wanted to accomplish.
Yeah.
And, so in many ways, it may be egotistical to say this, but I think I'm a better writer than she is. But she knew how to do the entrapment thing really well.
Well, that's the thing, right? Is it's like almost how much do you feel compelled to enter into those tropes? Because I feel that there's just certain tropes that exist in the psychological thriller, like befriending someone who you think is a glamorous person, but they end up backstabbing you.
Hmm.
Um, like in Carol, there's the guy who's actually spying on them and
Hmm.
recording them, but presents himself as a business person. And it's like there's always like the mistaken identity, forged
Yeah,
identity.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
she loved that. Husband just adored that stuff. And, as I say, she's got a lot of duality in her personality that comes out. So, as I said, she could be the victimizer, which I think she was more of. And I think she was rather abusive with her lovers, and loved to write a character like Tom Ripley because that made her feel good. And then she could also be the victim. She understood, I think, both emotions, and as a result, she got it. She knew how to put those two together. And I don't know. For me, I've written about monomaniacs or stalkers. Um, and that was a lot of fun. That was the psychologist Shadow, but a therapist who acquires a stalker and doesn't know at first what's happening, and then slowly realizes it. And then, I've written about a book about a boy with dissociative identity disorder, multiple personality, Jack and I, and a whole bunch of murderers. And different kinds of people. So I think that that's something that fascinates me. I just like to know how they tick. How would they behave? Because what I like to do, and there's a line, I don't know if I can find it, that Pat said, she really let her characters run. She would know sort of, what they're going to do, but not how they're going to do it.
Mm.
And she wanted to just see what they would do. And that's very much the way this book was written. I didn't quite know what the ending was going to be. I hadn't worked it out, but I knew where I was sort of going. But I let the characters have free reign. And as I got to know them better, like you would a friend, what they eat and drink, what they would wear, how they would physically move, then, I think you do a better job as a writer um, depicting that character. And so that's much her philosophy too. I mean, I haven't always done that, but quite often I do.
Well, and you have such cinematic language. Like, I love that when you bring
Hmm.
us into Venice and you really depict the Guggenheim collection where, Jenny meets Randy, who is, very mysterious. And I don't want to give too much away, but it has such an alluring, almost colorism aesthetic to it, where like I could see this playing out. And I love that kind of language.
Hmm.
And I'm not trying to, have you engage Laury in pitting you against other writers, but it does always interest me how trade press and really popular psychological thriller writers, they don't always capture all of that nuance. Like it tends to be, like you're saying, it tends to be sometimes just plot driven, but not like an Edith Wharton. Like what I like you do, and I know it's in contemporary time, but Edith Wharton's House of Mirth, like I'll always remember how she sets it up in Grand Central Station because it's such vivid language
Hmm.
with sensory
Hmm.
moments. And you do that with the senses
Well,
too. Yeah.
part of it, don't forget, I'm also was a fine arts photographer, and I taught a location workshop in Venice, and I've been there 3 times for fairly good days. And so a lot of what I did when I was there was pictorial, and the food and the colors and the smells and everything. So it was a really easy transition for me because I had all those picture notes in my head. But I think also being a photographer, I've always been able to see things a little differently. And I would say you're right because I was just reading a Patricia Cornwall book to review, and it's just sort of flabby writing and a lot of ticks that made me absolutely nuts. And I thought, how in the world? I don't know how many books she's written, 25 or so. I don't know how she got away with it. I don't know why our editors let her do this stuff. And that's true of a number of other psychological suspense writers that I've run into, with a few exceptions, mostly British. Um, they do a better job than we do, but I think they're more interested in character, and that's where the difference is also. I'm very interested in the character and how they got to be who they are and to behave the way they do. And I think Pat Highsmith was very interested in that too.
Yeah, well, you give us the lesson in introspection, in my opinion. I love introspective characters. I like pauses. I like when you get to sit in the space and Laurie, all of your writing, not just Jenny Kidd, but everything I've read of yours is so beautifully done. And I can't wait for more people to read Jenny Kidd because, it's not, it may seem proper on the outside, but trust me, there is so much sexual goings on and underground things happening. Like, this is not a tame novel by all means. And, like, that to
No,
me
no.
is what I love is like the slow burn. And to me, that's how I would describe Patricia Highsmith is she does people will either like her work or not because she is building up to suspense. Like it doesn't happen right away. And I think
Hmm.
maybe that is the American British divide is Americans really want literature right now to reflect their streaming and their binge watching and it has to be constant going on
Yeah.
energy. The spring season is here, which means there's a new issue of the Gay and Lesbian Review called Victorian Times, all about my favorite period of literature, the 19th century. And you'll see a rugged Walt Whitman on the cover and the dandy Oscar Wilde. Well, guess what? My first article is now published in the Gay and Lesbian Review called Once Upon a Time in Camden. It's the intro to my book, which looks into their queer literary relationship, but also Whitman and Wilde's homoerotic poetics, and specifically what Whitman does with male same sex desire before the category of homosexuality even existed. Like, how did he even express this in his poetry? Well, you'll have to read my book to find out. Book coming soon. If you know of a publisher, let me know. I'm shopping around right now. But this Victorian issue is so special with the Gay and Lesbian Review. There's articles on Dr. Jekyll and Victor Frankenstein. I'm about to see The Bride, which I can't wait to see. And right, Guillermo del Toro's new Frankenstein is all the rage. There's an article on Monte Cristo's Women in Love, Tchaikovsky's Men. I love Tchaikovsky's ballet. I'm particularly an admirer of the Sleeping Beauty. One on Captain Cobb. There's film and TV shows reviewed like Heated Rivalry, Boots, Kiss of the Spider Woman, which, if you don't know, I had an episode with Jeremy Fox from the Gay and Lesbian Review, the managing editor, and Colin Carmen and Joseph Federico, and we talked all about Heated Rivalry. You have to listen to it. And Kiss of the Spider Woman, I keep recommending to everyone. It is an astounding film. Boots, I actually had the creator Greg Cope White on the podcast too. You'll have to listen to his interview. Also, if you haven't heard our episode on the kink issue of the magazine, it's really, really interesting. And the ethnography one. And yes, there will be an episode soon about the Victorian issue. So get your hands on the Gay and Lesbian Review. The digital subscription is really easy to get, glreview.org. The print subscription also, head on over to the website, click subscribe, use the promo code ITBR choice. You get a free issue of the magazine. Choose the Victorian issue, will you? So head to their Instagram, their TikTok. I love the Gay and Lesbian Review. I get so many book recommendations, TV show, film recommendations. One of the films that I can't wait to watch is in this issue. I want to say it's pronounced Pillion or Pillion. I think I made it French there, with Alexander Skarsgård. So enjoy your reading, everyone. And if you're reading the Gay and Lesbian Review, please reach out to me. I want to let them know, that you all listening to this podcast are reading their magazine. Now that the spring semester is here, I am so excited to let you all know about a publisher, an independent publisher that's celebrating 40 years of great books called Broadview Press. I love Broadview Press. I have so many of their editions of classic literature like Wuthering Heights, which is coming out soon, and it's our book club choice. And they have so many academic books for instructors and for students and the general public. So I've had so many exciting guests on, from guests talking about The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, guests talking about vampire literature, horror literature. I'm looking at you, Jeffrey Andrew Weinstock, whose book actually just came out called Horror Theory. Look it up. And I cannot wait because I have two exciting guests coming on soon. And I've recorded their episode, so I know that it's going to be such an interesting conversation. The first is Rachel Tukolsky, who wrote a book called Writing on Fire, a fierce yet friendly guide to writing humanities essays in college. I've used excerpts of it for my Writing 2 course at Montclair. It has gone over so well. I just love what Rachel does. And we get into this in our episode about this metaphor about writing on fire, like how that's a great way to think about free flowing, brainstorming, creative ideas, and getting into that flow state, which, as Rachel explains, happens not just in writing, but in many other avenues. And then the other guest that I have on is David Starkey, who wrote a book called Academic Writing Now, a brief guide for busy students. It is designed to cover the basics of a college writing course in a concise, student friendly format. Each chapter concentrates on a crucial element of composing an academic essay and is capable of being read in a single sitting, which, for a generation, myself included, I think all of us now, just consumed by digital media or just this attention grabbing technology, reading in a single sitting is definitely a plus. So head to Broadview Press, use the promo code Ivory Tower, and you'll get 20% off every single book in their collection. There's also a really cool digital library collection they have. So if you're a librarian, take a look at that. Message me. If you're a librarian, I'd be happy to show you what that new collection looks like. And I hope you all enjoy your reading.
Yeah. Well, even though she's an American, she was born in Texas in 1921. Um, but she was never really that popular in America because I think her aesthetics were much more in tune with France, Switzerland, Germany, England, but particularly the French culture, I think, appealed to her a lot. Not the food. She hardly ate anything. She was an alcoholic, a smoker, and probably, as I say, not somebody I'd want to spend time with, but um, she had something. But I think she was very European in a lot of her ways. And so I think things that were okay there, but not okay here. She had trouble sometimes getting American publishers, particularly like the New Yorker constantly snubbed her for her short stories. And, but she was published very widely in Europe and was a real star there. So I do think there's a real difference, and I tend to be more character driven in my work, and I think I've got a little more of a European mentality than maybe some American writers. And, she was lesbian too. And that was back, in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, when this wasn't such a good thing to be in this country in particular. But in France or Germany, it wasn't such a big deal. So she felt more comfortable there.
Well, and you're
Uh,
right. So many of her contemporaries, like even James Baldwin, does so well. It actually moves to Europe, if I remember. He
mhm.
goes to France,
I think so.
to Paris,
I
maybe.
think so. Yeah,
Okay.
they all
Um,
did.
yeah. And well, Gertrude Stein, like Virginia Woolf's Orlando. I mean, there's like such an experimental thing that happens
Hmm.
in Europe with sexuality so much earlier than America. Like the only
Yeah,
one, I mean, The City and the Pillar with Gore Vidal, I feel like anything that does have any kind of same-sex element ends in tragedy. It's like they liked when they were murdered in America.
that's what the publishers wanted here. They didn't want to publish a happy ending, and Vidal really railed against that. And he got mad about a lot of his reviewers, and basically thought they were provincial. But he never admitted. I don't think he ever admitted he was gay, although it was pretty obvious. uh, but he's a wonderful writer, and his essays are tremendous.
Yeah.
I wish he were around today. He'd probably have a heart attack and die all over
Yeah.
again.
I know, right? So many
Uh,
thinkers and writers, I don't even know if they would be able to predict or digest the
no, no.
kind of
But
chaos
yeah,
politics.
yeah. So I don't know. Highsmith, I found one quote that I love, that she was sort of a what was it? I'm see if I can find it. She was a brewing, spewing volcano of toxicity and revenge fantasies, convinced that dark forces were in her blood. And
Mm,
apparently, somewhere along the line, she was at a bar in a hotel, and the psychiatrist was sitting talking to the owner, and he pointed to Pat and said, "You do know you've got a psychopath right over there," and he hadn't talked to her, but he picked up on this behavior. I don't think she was a psychopath. I think well, I don't know, but I know she was at least a sociopath. Had very shallow emotions, no empathy really. She would fake it, but she wasn't empathetic.
Mhm.
Towards herself, yeah. I mean, yeah, but not towards other people. So
Well, and what's the end of her life, Laurie? Like, how does she end
pretty
her?
sad at the end. She deteriorated from the alcohol, the poor eating habits, and the drinking. Uh, and I think she died of, I think it was lung cancer or something like that,
Oh,
pulmonary
wow.
problems, and/or heart. But she finally built this sort of mausoleum kind of building in Switzerland where she died, and it was a very forbidding building. No windows in the front hardly at all. Looked very off-putting, but there was, I think, either an inner courtyard or something like that. But she
Mm.
still had a lot of friends from her early days. She maintained through letters and correspondence and visits a lot of people that, you would have thought they would have said enough already, go away.
Yeah, but and I feel like without her, like without Patricia Highsmith's work, what kind of TV, film, like because I feel that there's so many shows in our current moment that I could like point to and say,
Hmm.
that's Patricia Highsmith inspired. I mean, we
Yeah.
talked about Saltburn, but I think even The White Lotus is a
Yeah, I
mixture
think,
of Agatha Christie meets Patricia
yeah, I mean,
Highsmith.
I think those two are probably the most influential, Edgar Allan Poe and
Oh, yeah.
also, yeah, but I think Christie, of course, Christie is the grande dame. But yeah, I mean, she does the sort of enclosed setting, murder in a mansion kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. The
Uh,
Knives Out element.
yeah, but what that allows her to do is to keep control of all of her characters. So the reader knows who's there. And so then we have to read through and try to figure out who done it. And that I have to say is a very nice setup. I have done that a few times because it makes it a little easier. One of the toughest things are cell phones because everybody knows where everybody is, and they're communicating every little twitch of their brain. And I set everything before cell phones.
Well, so when did you set Jenny Kidd? Like, what's the time period roughly?
2000.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So apparently, as I recall, Jenny does not have a cell phone. And her father, who is very domineering and wants her to be a banker like he is, um, has constantly undermined her artistic talent, which is pretty serious. And so he gets her a landline in Venice because so he wants to be able to talk to her. And, so we don't have a computer or a cell phone here. So, you can't go look up stuff. And I really prefer that because that way people have to think, and that allows you to, look into their perspective and what they figure out versus what they can go and look online. So yeah, this was set in 2000.
Well, and I love that because I'm practicing more conscious uncoupling technology. I don't know what the official term is, but just conscious unplugging. There we go.
Hmm.
And I do feel like the social media sphere feels so real. Like, of course, I love to publicize the podcast and things like that. But when you're away from it for a while, you realize, wait, like that's there in its own space. I have my own agency in my life.
Hmm.
This doesn't have to overtake my psyche. Like, no one is really trying to, in everyday life, they usually don't say, well, where were you on social media? Like, I just feel like it becomes this artificial
Yeah,
society.
it's an
And
addiction.
it is. You
Let's
get like a
face it.
dopamine addiction and rush every time
Yeah,
you're on
yeah,
it.
yeah,
But
yeah.
then it ends. And then
And
you have
it
to begin it again.
and it doesn't really do anything
Yeah.
for you. I mean, I think, um, a writer needs to be quiet. A writer needs to be alone and not disturbed. And when you know, your email's pinging or your phone's ringing, you forget it. You can't think. You have to get into the zone. It's the same in athletics, photography, painting, any event. Really, you have to be quiet in order to get there, and that just doesn't happen. So I often wonder how people that have been raised on computers and cell phones, how they're going to manage to be creative in a way separate from them.
Yeah.
I wonder, do they have those skills? You know,
Well, I think that's a great point. And also, I think that it would be so interesting to hear your take on, do you think that current literature right now, like top sellers in trade presses, a part of it is driven by this appetite for constant dopamine addiction? Like, is there any correlation between these parasocial social media communities and the literature space? Like, what becomes a bestseller?
Welcome to Severed, a podcast week dropping new episodes every Monday. Severed True Crime and Severed Paranormal episodes deep dive into murder, mysteries, and the otherworldly in a concise format. A 7-minute story to frame the case with thoughtful analysis and our usual banter.
We sometimes find the lighter side of darker cases. We offer 3 spin-off shows, Severed Strange Stories, Severed Haunted You, and Severed Serial Killers that highlight the unusual to lighthearted topics from the digital dumpsters of true crime, haunted universities, and the minds of madness like Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer.
We are your co-hosts. I'm Harry Chambers.
And I'm Drew Hudson. Listen on all major podcast platforms, including Rogue Media Network and Radio Garden State. Follow us on Instagram at severed_podcast.
Are you a fan of classic Hollywood movies?
Are you a fan of queer cinema?
Then do we have the podcast for you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Christian Garcia.
And I'm Luke Delmar.
And we are your hosts of That Old Gay Classic Cinema, where we take a look at some of the greatest films of all time and analyze them through a queer theoretical lens.
Let's be honest. LGBTQIA plus people have been a part of Hollywood since its inception, and this podcast celebrates those artists and entertainers of yesteryear while also taking a closer look at the queer-coded characters and stories in classic Hollywood films long before queer representation entered the mainstream.
So follow us down the road of classic cinema as we give you a guide to some of the films that touched our hearts, brains, and even gave us courage to be ourselves.
You can listen to That Old Gay Classic Cinema wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok.
All right, listeners, we're ready for our close-up.
we want a fast fix. Well, just even watching the short story migrate from maybe 5,000 words to flash fiction now, under 1,000 words. People want a quick bite and they want to go on to the next thing or go do something else. And I think, if you just sit and watch television for a little while, you just look at all the commercials for whatever, they're all violent. They're all loud, most of them, and they're annoying. I mean, I just sit there with my finger on the remote, mute button. And I think we've gotten into this habit of superficial excitement, and it's like going to Great Adventure and riding a roller coaster or whatever. It's just like, what have you done? What was the net result? What did you learn taking a ride on that roller coaster? What did you learn from that film? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And so it's just empty calories. And I think that's exactly what it is. And it's a shame, because I think we've really impeded the progress of culture, and I think the creators are going to be different going forward.
Yeah.
They already are.
Yeah. Well, and in setting Jenny Kidd in 2000, and in Venice, but also we've talked a little about the museum space and these different physical spaces. I also feel every time now, like I really seek out a new bookstore, or I was talking to you about New Hope when we celebrated my grandmom's
Farley's bookstore is the
101st
best.
birthday. I love
Yeah.
Farley's, yes. And that, like, sitting in yesterday, I saw the play Messy White Gaze, which was very funny. And, teaser, we're going to have the playwright on the podcast. But after that, like, even going to hang out with friends at these gay club, well, not clubs, but bars, Flex and Atlas, mostly like queer men. And I was with my husband, but it's like even just socializing and talking and networking, I feel that there's I feel almost that there's this push right now to not frequent arts and culture spaces, but instead to silo yourself in an online space.
Hmm.
And that worries me because there's so much joy out of going to an art museum and just reflecting and thinking and sitting in the silence. And I think that we're losing a lot of the young generation. Like, I love bringing my students to those spaces for extra credit because even the public library is such a joy. And I think
Hmm.
we've lost the joy of arts and culture institutions. And I mean, in my opinion, I would argue it's also a strategy from the current administration to delegitimize arts and culture spaces. So, like, the push isn't really, our culture isn't really being pushed into those spaces.
PBS is just going under. I mean, that
Mm.
is a horrible thing. Washington National Opera, where I work one evening to photograph Placido Domingo there. That they're leaving the Kennedy Center. And, you've got a president who is just absolutely 100% uncultured and doesn't have any idea about any of it and doesn't care. And he's not interested in education. He's not interested in anything really except numero uno, and that's it. So, I think he was popular in part because of his attitude, uh, the anti-coast, the anti-New York City, San Francisco mode, where the intellectuals hang out, or going after Harvard and Yale and Princeton. That was an anti-move. It's all a part of it, and his followers fit right in that slot. And unfortunately, he's done a lot of damage, and I agree with you. I think he picked up somehow on the psyche of the United States, particularly the middle of it, and we have changed. So
Well, and do you feel, last time I talked, or maybe the first time you came on, we talked a little about, for those listening, if they don't know, like, you used to work for Princeton University Press. Like, you know, do you feel that there is such a falsity about is there such a thing as an intellectual elite? And if so, what does that look like? Like, is there a huge group of intellectuals who are trying to make others feel less than? Because I mean, it's not something I'm necessarily observing, but you know,
it's there because the university presses are still in existence, but a lot of their income comes from libraries,
hmm,
university libraries. I mean, when we would publish 500 copies of a book, my guess is 350 of them went to libraries.
yeah.
So I think there's still that sort of insular kind of area of professors and academics and scholars and researchers that are still, plowing away. But I think it's gotten tighter and smaller, and their work doesn't get past their little milieu very much. And but again, this is a real change. I very am concerned. I mean, just watching, as I say, all these commercials on television, all these dinosaurs chasing after people and just ridiculous. It's stupid. I mean, there's no character development. You don't care. You're just watching action and color and noise, and that's all it really is. And a lot of our books are turning into that, unfortunately. But
Well, it feels very like Fahrenheit 451
yes,
in a way.
yes,
Um,
yes.
but yeah, like where they're just staring at the screen and there's no analytic critical reasoning happening.
Hmm.
Like lulled into a trance. Well, I think we could also say that there is a real brainwashing cult like behavior going on that has captured the
Hmm.
country into a spell. And
Uh-huh.
having critical thinking is going to poke holes in that and break the spell. So, yeah.
You can't do both.
No, no. Well, so like where do you think literature right now, like if you go to your local bookstore, you know, or the library, like is there anything that's being published where you feel that American authors or just global authors, they're doing a good job of showcasing? Like, is there any genre that you think is really thriving right now?
Well, I'm just reading, I think it's my last Kate Atkinson book, and I was so tired last night, but I couldn't put it down. I was laughing, because she's funny. She does all kinds of things, and maybe I identify a little bit with that because I write in different genres, but mostly she's done a lot of um, series like the Jason Brody series that are sort of crime fiction, but she is a damn good writer and funny, wry. And that gives me hope that there's somebody out there. I'm reading a lot of Scandi noir writers now because again they're really good. They have wonderful settings, and the characters are interesting, and it's refreshing not to have everybody just killing and murdering everybody every 5 minutes. Or it's a nice change. So I think there are some bright spots, but not many in this country, unfortunately. I keep looking, but I haven't seen very many recently.
Yeah. I feel
But
like non I
yeah,
was
go
just gonna
ahead.
say, I feel like nonfiction has really um exploded creatively recently. Or at
Yeah.
least I'm being drawn more now to new nonfiction.
Well, I think what's happening too is I think as people get older, they're more interested in it.
Mm.
Like I found myself in recent decades, sort of getting more interested in history, which I was somewhat interested in, but now I'm really quite interested. And I think men read a lot more nonfiction than women do, also, except for maybe some biographies or autobiographies. So I think that that's sort of a natural trend, but I don't know. I have yet to really come upon American writers that are really good. I mean, even Harlan Coben, who lives in New Jersey, um, and I enjoy reading his books, but there's not a lot to them. But when they do them as films, which he has a ton on Netflix right now, they are treated with a BBC cast, a British cast, and I think that lifts them up. And the acting is first rate, and whoever wrote the script did a good job. And I think they're out there. It's just I would be lost with that BritBox and Acorn. I
Yeah,
don't.
no, I know. You swear by BritBox. I need to like
Yeah,
investigate
yeah.
BritBox. But also, I think it would be, you know, worth also mentioning, like, what do you think about smaller presses or even self-publishing? I was having this conversation with a professor friend of mine, and I'm really trying to convince her to self-publish her short story because at least she's like on the fence about it because
Yeah.
it's going to be hard to really get her short story out to like a large audience, and it's not really counting towards her academic um profile. So it's more of a passion project. And I said, well, if you just want to reach, you know, a larger audience, you could always release it on Amazon. So I don't know. There's different feelings about
Like,
whether or not self-publishing allows for more creative liberties in storytelling.
I don't really know that it does, and I've been told by many bookstore owners that they won't allow any self-published books in their store.
Mm.
And one of the first questions when I do a reading, somebody will invariably ask is, did you traditionally publish this or is it self-publishing? And that is coming across to me as a writer saying, if it's self-publishing, it's not as good as,
Mm.
because you don't have any, judge, so to speak, that the publisher, or the whoever's the acquisitions editor is applying to. I think there are cases where nonfiction is useful. I mean, self-publishing nonfiction, particularly a scholarly one that's got a really narrow field, and maybe you're an expert in it, so your name is really well known. So when you say, Dr. Rimby is publishing in Virginia Woolf or whatever, and you're well known, then people will go and maybe buy that book who are interested in Virginia Woolf and you. But not so true with a fiction writer because they're not well known. And even if your friend has published in literary journals, which is a good thing, and I would recommend it, because my two collections, almost every one of the stories was published in a journal. That helps, but I would be very wary of self-publishing. There are enough small publishers that you could find somebody to do it.
Yeah.
Is this person lesbian or is she straight?
No, she's straight. Yeah.
Straight? Okay. Well, there are a lot of good presses. Short stories, on the other hand, are more difficult in general to publish as a collection,
Yeah.
because people don't read them as much as they read full-length work.
Yeah.
Which is funny because it sort of seemed like they would, because they're short attention spans. You'd think they would look at one story, 10 pages, and then they put it down, and the next morning they'd come and read another. But it doesn't seem to work that way. I don't understand it, but
Yeah, but I think that's, well, how about the difference between, like, say, Spectrum Books, who brought out, Jenny Kidd, the revised edition. Like, Spectrum Books, correct me if I'm wrong, Laurie, but they really value LGBTQ voices or
yes,
these kinds of narratives.
yeah, and they also have an imprint, Enigma Books,
Mm.
which is not necessarily LGBTQ. It's mystery or suspense, because Andrew May, the publisher, really loves that, and he also really likes sci-fi and a couple of things that. But he's really got a pretty broad-minded view, and he's been extremely kind to me, because he's really allowed me to go wherever I want to go, which is everywhere. So he's been really a great guy, and I'm so fortunate to have come into contact with him. He's just a lovely man, personality wise too. So I think but he's not going to be for everybody. And I think he has published some short stories, but I think and there are some good short story writers. Laurie Osland is one in this country, and her wife, Anne Rafe, is also, but they've both done novels too. And I just finished one by Vishwas Gaitandi, who is.
Wait, no, I'm having him on the podcast.
I told him to
Oh,
contact.
thank you. Oh,
Yeah.
I love his work too.
Yeah, he's really good, and he's a good short story writer. So that would be, I would really try to get a traditional publisher. There are a lot of them out there that, you're not going to make money. But as you said, she's more interested in getting her work out, and, as much publicity as she can generate herself. That's what you have to do with a small publisher,
Yeah.
because they just don't have a budget for, promotion particularly. So
Yeah.
that's the big difference between a trade house
Yeah. Well,
network. Yeah.
and I love the like Alcov, Acorn, Spectrum books. I mean, there's so many great small presses that
Mhm.
I work with too, with their writers, like on the podcast. But yeah, like once, of course, I've had authors who are with HarperCollins or Penguin,
Mhm.
But I I think that what's really nice is having a mix of both as a reader. Like because sometimes I find the small presses they have more of those like very layered narratives. And I'm not
Mhm.
saying all trade press books don't do that because there are some, right? But
Sure.
I don't want to you know, talk down about authors I've had from trade like big publishers
Yeah.
who have written really layered narratives. But, a lot of their questions that come from Penguin, for example, is, well, how are you going to market this to a bigger
Mhm.
demographic? How can we change, maybe edit this narrative a little to fit more of a formula? Yeah.
Mhm.
So it becomes like a publicity
Yeah,
question.
and the people that were really famous publishers are all retired or dead by now. Most of them, there are only a handful left, and so as a result, the people that really were innovative in their day for 50 or 60 years are gone, and that's also true with a lot of the literary journals. So, you're really getting a younger crowd in, which is great and fine, but I think that you're right that they're a little more attuned to how many books can you sell. I mean, it's always been the case, but they would still take a chance on a really well written, interesting book. Now it's getting tougher.
Yeah.
I mean, when I first started, I got a lot of interest from agents, but then they would finally say, "This is a mid-level book," which I was thrilled to hear. Until I realized that they weren't going to pick it up unless it was a thriller or, something like that. But they said the writing, everything else was great. So, that's one reason I went and looked in Britain because I thought, well, there's still a little more old school publishing over there, and it's true in France too, I think, in Germany. So I think you have almost a better chance with some of these people, and they may treat you a little better too while we're at it.
Yeah. Well, and I think that what's you know exciting too is where social media, like there are things I know that you enjoy about it. Like I know we kind of did a whole dissing on it, but like what I love is when I discover a new author on social media and I add them to my
Mhm.
TBR list. And like on TikTok even and Instagram there's a lot of promotion going on from younger writers, and like some of them they're just selling through TikTok, like doing promotional campaigns. And I
Mhm.
think, you know, writers now, would you say it's true? Writers now really, a lot of them have become their own publicist in a
They
way
have
that
to.
wasn't before.
They have to.
Mhm.
But you've got to remember too, there are so many more writers out there than there used to be because when you had to type a manuscript and then copy it maybe, and then send it by mail to a publisher and wait for the publisher to read it and come back. That was labor intensive. And now anybody who can type thinks they can write a novel. And unfortunately, this has crowded, agents' desks and publishers. And so, that's why I think it's even more important to have some kind of a thumbs up for a writer from a publisher or an agent, because I think that helps. Otherwise, people don't know where to go in terms of what is this a quality book that was self-published or not? The suspicion lies there that it may not be. Like they'll say, well, why didn't you get it traditionally published if it's good enough? That's
Yeah.
a good question to ask. Unless it's something like a family history or, something that's obviously just limited to a small group of readers, that's a different matter. But I would encourage your friend to go out and try to find somebody. if she goes to poets and writers, there's a section of small publishers in there. You can
Mhm.
put in your main genre and subgenre, and they will spit them out, and with the links and everything. And there are a lot of other places you can go to that are excellent.
Yeah. Well, I know because we've had, there's this, back and forth I have, but I can release because I think this will be released right beginning of March. I don't know. Probably when you're hearing this, it's either the end of February or the beginning of March. But my new article that Laury has been privy to, like what I've been doing with my dissertation, is I have my first published um, piece of the dissertation. I have other articles out there, but it's the first from my dissertation from my intro, and it's now in the Gay and Lesbian Review, which I'm so excited about
You
because
should be. You should be very happy because that's a great, great source for you for the future.
yeah, it's that the network, you know, it's the readers that I really want to engage with.
Right.
And you're right, like when you find the audience, and then my hope is, it'll hopefully help me figure out who's interested in this project, because
Mhm.
a part of me is like, oh, I could self-publish it like Whitman self-published Leaves of Grass. But also
Yeah.
Whitman, had his own things that he was going through why he self-published. But yes, I think you're right. And sometimes I think it's that, like, what do you say to writers out there? It's that patience game where you just want everyone to read it right away. And like maybe that's also a temptation to self-publish, is not only not knowing who to contact, but just wanting to let go of your project instead of sitting with it.
Yeah, I think it's about patience. You're right. I mean, I think you'll do a lot better. As I said, before to you, University of Wisconsin's got a really good program, and I bet they would be interested. And, but there are a lot of other publishers that would be too. And, be it a university press, which is an obvious place, if you can find one that would be up your alley. But there are a lot of other places I think that would too. And, maybe look through the Gay and Lesbian Review for who's publishing what books, see who the publishers are. And, then you can say, well, my article, which is the introduction to my book, just appeared in this journal, and I saw your book being advertised, and I thought you might be a really good publisher to approach. Now, that would earn you a lot of brownie points. Tells them about what you did, but also that you were looking and curious, and that, I think that would be a very good thing to do.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's
Yeah.
very good advice. And yeah, and I think also I needed to kind of, after such an intense writing experience, and I'm sure you felt this too, sometimes there's nothing wrong with you putting like your work aside for a year. I started focusing on other, jobs that I was working on after my PhD, and then kind of let it sit there. And now I've returned to it with fresh eyes. And I'm like, oh, well, that's what I really fell in love with when I wrote this, was
Hmm.
this part of it. And, you know, that I don't know if I would have wanted it to have come out right away. And I think there's always a little waiting period, specifically with academic books.
I think it's always true. I mean, and unfortunately, very few fiction writers do that, and very few um, lesbian writers do that, unfortunately, and you can see it right away. If they had just gone over their manuscript another 10 or 15 times and waited a little while, gotten more feedback from other people that are sophisticated, I think that would have, it's always a good idea.
Yeah.
And I find all kinds of things that particularly in a more complicated plot, you find mistakes that you made
Oh, and I
that
know
you
how you
you see
feel.
the first 25 times, and then all of a sudden, it's like,
Well,
oh
and I know how you feel, Laurie, about
no.
mistakes in a like
Hate it.
um trade press, big time publisher. I know it
Yeah,
it makes
yeah.
you, I know it makes me
Ooh,
also, uh, once you see one mistake, I just think, oh, there's going to be more mistakes.
hmm
And it
And
can distract your reading experience. I mean,
yeah,
we try to teach students now, grammatical mistakes it's not the main thing I'm focused on. I'm focused on their argument, but I will say if you have multiple grammatical mistakes, your argument is going to be weakened because your reader is now questioning your credibility.
exactly. And
So it,
that's
it does matter.
for a reader, you have to believe that the author knows what he or she is doing and is an authority on whatever it is the subject is. And as soon as you start getting a crack in that, you've lost the reader. And poor punctuation, poor grammar, or just lazy verbs, lazy nouns, things like that, repetitive structure. Those things just will really put a dent in the sense of authority for the reader, and that's a bad thing to do. But I see it a lot, unfortunately. You know, you see it somebody like I always get these guys wrong, Preston and Childs, who write a really wide range, but both of them are brilliant guys who knows a lot. They both know a lot about geology, ancient rites. I mean, they did a setting, one of the books in late 1800s New York, and it was flawless, absolutely flawless. You could really, really see it. And every time I read one of their books, I feel like, okay, you know what you're talking about, and that's so exciting. And they always bring home the bacon. They always know what they're doing. And I but there aren't that many that are like that. So
Yeah.
they're good.
Yeah.
They're a good writing
And there
team.
are great, like even, Laurie's written in the romance genre, like there are really interesting. I mean, I don't tend to read a lot in um popular romance, but I love thriller and psychological thrillers. So that's why like Jenny Kidd is so exciting for me because it is my favorite genre. But um I find that it's very interesting how these niche bookstores are popping up. So it's great that there's now more romance bookstores, there's now horror bookstores. Heated rivalry, which I'm going to talk about on the podcast with my husband and others. That has really taken off, but my concern is always okay, if this might be the first time someone is like re-engaging with literature again. Great, what's next for them? Are they going to pick up a new, are they going to try to read more in that genre? Are they going to cross into other genres? I don't know if necessarily, like, say, reading The Housemaid, which, right, she's like a very popular thriller writer right now. And I haven't read anything by her, so I can't
I
make
haven't either.
assumptions. Yeah. And I do want to read The Housemaid just to see how it differs from the film. But are more people going to pick up thriller novels because they're reading a novel that is now a popular film? It's like, are people going to read more classic literature because Wuthering Heights is coming out as a new film in
Mhm.
February?
I think they do. I think it's sort of backwards promotion, but I think they do. I mean, I absolutely think so. Yeah. I mean, I read all over the place, but I do find I'm happiest when I'm in psychological suspense or that kind of a novel.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Just
mean, I'm starting a classic novel book club at our library here in Secaucus, which I can't wait for. And they're actually, I polled the town and I'm like, how many of you are interested in reading a classic novels? And there was like a pretty decent, I think maybe
yeah,
20 people so far, which even if I had like 5 people in the book club, I would consider that a win. And
yeah,
I do
yeah.
think, I always love just challenging myself to read more widely or reread or return to a genre I used to really enjoy because
Mhm.
you know teaching there's certain genres and books that are right in front of me, and the things that I used to widely read, I have to really um force myself to give the time to that, and that's why I love having conversations with you, Laury, because you're so wide in not just reading, but your writing style, which is
Yeah,
a
I
breath of
yeah.
fresh air.
Yeah, I have fun, and it's just, it's a pleasure for me. And people say, "Well, why do you go to so many different genres?" And I think of my mother, who was a really fine painter. When I was growing up, she kept saying, "Well, you can only do one thing at a, and do it well." And I said, "No." We used to get into arguments about it because I was very interested in the, visual arts as well as writing, but writing was my first passion. And she was very much, you do one thing and do it well. And a lot of writers, that's the way they approach things, and that's fine. It's just not me. I tend to really go all over the place. And I've written a gay comedy. This is a comedy, the Morley book. But then I've written, as you say, one, I guess, one romance, maybe two, and but a lot of other ones too that are very
Short
different.
stories.
And some of
You've
them,
written plays.
I've written a play,
Okay.
which was just published in my last collection, Contrary. And that was, I wasn't sure if I wanted to do that play because I hadn't done one before. And I was like, so I gave it to two of my toughest, most reserved readers.
Hmm.
And they give me, I said, yeah, publish it. And
Is
Andrew
it
liked
going to
it.
be performed ever, Laurie? Because I think that would be really interesting.
I
Or a
I sent
stage
it to the
reading.
New Jersey Rep Theater in Long Branch here, but they take a year to get back, and they do a lot of local theater, but yeah, I haven't found anybody to take it. I think it would be a very good play and it'd be an inexpensive one to do because you basically have two main characters and then two smaller characters and more page, place setters, and I think that would be really an interesting play. You just need, two good actresses.
Yeah, even at a college campus, it could be
Well, that's
interesting.
what I was thinking too. I was thinking because I know Brookdale occasionally does some plays, but a lot of them do famous plays. They don't do new stuff.
But
So
even in
that's
their well, we'll talk offline because
okay.
I have
Yes,
some, there would definitely be an interest at like Seton Hall. There's going to be and I'll send it out to you and everyone here listening. But there's going to be a Walt Whitman play that I really have fallen in love with
I
the
didn't know he
questions
wrote a
that are
play.
being asked. Yeah. And it's like all about just connecting Whitman's time to our current crises and asking about Whitman's America and the warnings that like his poetics provides. So the playwright Sarah Vanderschaff is going to bring it to different colleges. So we had worked together, and she's going to come to Seton Hall. So I do think that there's an appetite, definitely. Like I was,
We'll talk
yeah,
about
we'll
it.
talk about it because
I
I
know.
do think plays right now that there's a lot of gatekeeping at a professional level
Mm,
that new works I really think do really well in a public space like the public park
mhm.
amphitheaters in staged readings in
So,
campuses.
summer house
Yes, summer
production.
stock, exactly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and I think Jenny Kidd would make a great film.
I do too.
It just kills me. I had I guess he was a producer in Hollywood who was pretty well known. I can't remember his name now, but I checked him out and he called me and said, listen, I'm interested in it. I don't know how he got a hold of this was the first edition. But again, he thought it was just a little too edgy for that time period. And he was probably right, but he really liked the story and he saw the cinematic possibilities because you really do feel like you've had a trip to Venice, whether you've
Yes.
been there or not, or if you haven't been there, you want to go there
Oh, could
after
you
reading
do
the
me a
book.
favor and read,
Yeah.
Lori? Could you read your synopsis to everyone?
Oh, okay,
I would
sure.
love for them all to just hear what they're in store for.
Okay. While spending autumn in Venice, a young American artist Jenny Kidd hopes to create a portfolio of paintings to launch her career and establish her independence from her tyrannical father. At the Guggenheim collection, she encounters Randy, a colorful British woman who invites her to a masked ball at the Palazzo Barbon. There, she meets the seductive Caterina Barbon and her brother Sebastiano, who entice Jenny into a world of glittering facades that cloak sexual perversion, art forgery, and murder. As Jenny struggles between her attraction to Katerina and her growing awareness that she's in danger, Jenny discovers an inner strength and spirit worthy of her infamous pirate ancestor.
I love just, you know, facades that cloak sexual perversion, art forgery, and murder. I mean, it's kind of like in the Chicago musical in the opening, where
Yeah,
I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's like you're about to see a story of murder, crime, and corruption,
yeah,
or,
yeah.
and sex is always thrown in there. But I think it's just fascinating what you do with Jenny Kidd, and like even tying her last name like to the
Pirate.
pirate ancestry is
And she's just the
fabulous.
opposite. She's a naive young woman. And I think the other thing that's really fascinating me about Venice is it's so beautiful. It's such a great city, lush, elegant. But if you are walking at night and you make a wrong turn and you wind up at the end of a little street and the rats are all of a sudden in the corner, you have a completely different feeling about the city. And so it's this sort of again, like Highsmith, the duality of the city itself, in addition to the characters, is part of it. And I think also the whole creative process, because I talk a bit about that, how Jenny works and as a painter. And I think that that's pretty interesting too. So there's, no, that's another little side element that a thriller wouldn't have. They
Yeah.
would just skip right over that.
Yeah. Well, if anyone's listening and are looking for books to turn into a film adaptation, Jenny Kidd would be
Yeah,
fabulous. I think Emerald Fennell definitely could do something interesting with it.
I tried to find where she was, but I couldn't get any place to write to her. She'd be
mm,
perfect.
I know. Well, if we somehow get in contact with Emerald Fennell, I'll
Okay.
make sure. I know Emerald Fennell. I'm really eager to see what happens with Wuthering Heights, but you
Oh,
know,
she's gonna do what? She's the one.
she's the
Ah,
one. Mhm.
oh boy, that's gonna be a dark one.
Yeah, yeah,
Not to say
definitely.
that it isn't already a dark story, but
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So, I also love too just how you take a city like Venice, and it reminds me of how cities have character, cities have personality. They, like New York City to me, it's not the most beautiful city, trust me, right? But it's not about the beauty of the sidewalks or the beauty of it being glittery. It's about the conversations and the people in New York City.
Hmm.
It's like the places,
Hmm.
like what happens in the Metropolitan Art Museum, what happens at the opera, what happens
Hmm.
in a boutique, in a department store. Like it's always the interior, the conversation possibilities, where a city like Paris, it's the grand, the Notre Dame. And like, I just find I love how cities, bring
Yeah.
you into different genres.
Well, and I think setting is really important to me because again, it's that visual aspect in Venice. It's a quintessential beautiful city, uh, and then I also wrote a book on Mykonos, set on Mykonos, which I love. I've been there quite a few times, and that again, it's sort of like an Agatha Christie contained novel, because you're on an island, and I'm always fascinated with islands, and I've written a couple of books on islands, and it's because you're containing the problem. The people that are there can't get off the island, or they don't get off the island, so you've got all the compression going on. So I think Venice,
Yeah.
in a sense, has a lot of that compression too, because it's really a village-like place in many ways. Everybody knows each other.
Mm.
At least the people that grew up there, although there are very few of them left because they've all can't afford to be in their own city,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
It's like Cherry Grove and the Pines.
Yeah,
How
yeah,
almost no one is like a born and raised
yeah.
Fire Islander anymore.
No, I've known a few, but they're not, they can't afford it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Well, it's like New York City. Everyone has moved to North Jersey or,
Yeah,
you know, further and further Long Island. Everyone
right.
just starts to, or they're in your area now, like in Monmouth
Yeah,
County.
because we have the ferry coming from New York City, and after the hurricanes and then COVID, a lot of people moved from the city here.
Which has
And
made it really exciting for New Jersey because I find there's a lot of the
yeah,
arts and culture scene
yeah, it's
now in
perked
so
up
many
since I
towns.
grew up here, and I mean, even the restaurants are finally better. I mean, that's what I always used to hate about Princeton. They were awful for so many years, and now they're really good.
Oh, yeah.
But it takes a while. I would always go to New Hope in Lambertville if I wanted to go out for dinner.
Oh, that is funny. Yeah. No, it's funny because now Princeton's dinner scene is like,
Yeah, it's
almost
exciting.
Michelin star restaurant quality at some
Yeah,
places.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Laury, I love talking with you.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Everyone, please get your hands on Jenny Kidd. Where can they find all of your work, Laury?
All my work except for the 4 volumes of poetry is available on Amazon, and most everything is on Kindle. I think Unlimited or Kindle, one of the two.
Okay.
Um, the Morley book's not on Kindle because it's a picture book, and it's oversized. So this is just in paperback, but it's fun. There are a lot of really great. I did the photography, the formatting, and
Oh.
he is very funny. It's told from his perspective.
Well, for those not watching, from the dog Morley's perspective.
Yes.
So I love that.
And yeah, so Amazon has everything. And my website is www.lauryaegan.com. So I also can mail out signed copies.
Great. Good, good. And everyone, Laurie's on Facebook and Instagram too. So make sure, you follow her.
Yeah.
And as always, love chatting with you. I could talk
Yes,
with you for hours about literature. It's just like it reignites that creative excitement of literature,
yeah. Well, I think you portray that very well all by yourself.
Well, I appreciate that, Laurie. And I think, the younger generation, what I always love in our chats is there there's always hope. Like there are younger people who love literature. And I
Mhm.
think it's getting these conversations into digital spaces that you could see digital and social media spaces as arts and culture spaces. Like both can exist. It's just
Mhm.
how do we find the balance?
Right,
you know,
right,
or how do you seek out podcasts that match your interests? And we don't need to be uh, getting quick dopamine hits of anxiety ridden conversations or news that just makes us sad because we can't really change the outcome.
right, right.
Not that we can't change the outcome, but as a collective, we need to, as a collective, we can make change, but it's also okay to escape into literature and other spaces, you know, instead of like
Mhm.
being in a constant state of uh, flight or fight. You know,
Yeah.
you can't exist in that space for a long time,
No.
uh, in a healthy way. But Laury, love everything that you're always writing, and it was such a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure. Absolutely, Andrew. Thank you so much.